What does it mean, dear women of valor, to gaze upon the world with eyes unclouded by the haze of illusion? Have you ever felt the quiet pang of isolation settle in as your thoughts deepen? As if the more you comprehend, the less the world wishes to hear your voice? Welcome to She Thinks, or haven where we unravel the intricate threads of philosophy to empower women and nurture the boundless potential of the next generation. Today, we embark on a profound exploration. Why does society tremble before those who think deeply, particularly women, whose voices, though long suppressed, rise with an unyielding strength that history cannot silence? Drawing inspiration from Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher renowned for his unflinching honesty, we delve into the paradox of intelligence, a gift that isolates as much as it illuminates, especially for women breaking free from the chains of expectation. This is not merely a question of why deep thinkers are feared. It is a reclamation of that fear as a source of power, a testament to the resilience of women who dare to see beyond the veil. Throughout history, women like Hypatia of Alexandria, philosophers, mathematicians, visionaries have faced rejection not for their errors, but for the brilliance of their truths that pierce the comfortable lies society clings to. Here at She Thinks, we traverse the landscapes of history, psychology, and philosophy to understand why intelligence in women stirs discomfort, how it holds a mirror to societal flaws, and why this resistance is woven into the very fabric of human nature. From Socrates' execution to Tesla's obscurity, we witness how minds that question are pushed to the margins, yet it is women, with their enduring will to truth, who emerge as the unsung architects of change. Join us as we interlace Schopenhauer's piercing insights with the struggles and triumphs of women, reflecting on how intelligence becomes both a burden and a beacon of hope. Whether you felt dismissed for the depth of your mind or seek to foster curiosity in your children, this journey is yours. Let us embrace the discomfort of truth together. For in understanding why society resists, we unlock the freedom to rise above it. Stay with She Thinks as we empower women to wield their intellect with boldness, crafting a legacy of strength and wisdom that echoes through generations. In the stillness of your own mind, women of courage, have you ever wondered why the world recoils from those who peer beyond the surface? Society has long harbored a quiet dread of deep thinkers, not because their ideas falter, but because they unveil truths others would rather leave buried. Schopenhauer, with his stark clarity, declared intelligence a curse, a solitary flame that burns too fiercely for a world lulled by shadows. For women, this curse carries an added weight, entwined with the heavy threads of gender norms that have demanded silence over insight, submission over sovereignty. History murmurs their names: Socrates, Galileo, Tesla. It is women like Hypatia, often erased from the narrative, who bear this struggle with a fierceness that defies time. These minds, whether carried by men or women, were not mistaken, they were simply too far ahead, and for women, the cost of such vision has always been steep. Pause for a moment, sisters in thought, and consider the weave of human psychology. Stand beside a woman of physical might, and you may marvel at her strength without feeling diminished. Meet another whose wealth glitters, and envy might stir, but it rarely cuts to your core. Yet, encounter a woman whose intellect towers above the ordinary, and a strange unease ripples through the air. Psychologists term this the mirror effect. A deep thinker, especially a woman, does not merely present new ideas, she reflects back the limits of those around her. In a society that has long cast women as nurturers, dependents, or ornaments, her presence becomes an act of rebellion, or quiet challenge to egos unready for such scrutiny. This is no fleeting social quirk. It is a primal instinct, etched into our being through ages of survival in tribes where harmony meant life, and dissent could mean death. Our ancestors flourished in groups where acceptance was safety, where exclusion spelled peril. The human brain, wired for belonging, perceives the intelligent woman as a disruptor, a fracture in the tribe's fragile unity. Her questions unravel the threads of tradition, her clarity lays bare the illusions that comfort the masses. Neuroscience offers a glimpse into this fear. When confronted with intellectual superiority, the amygdala, the sentinel of threat, flares to life, mistaking a brilliant mind for a lurking predator. For women, this reaction sharpens, as their intellect defies the roles society has carved: mother, wife, silent muse, roles that demand heart over head, duty over discovery. A 2021 Stanford study deepens this revelation. In solitude, a woman's brilliance may inspire. In a crowd, it threatens status. sparking exclusion or scorn. This resistance is not a modern invention. It stretches back through the annals of time. Socrates, with his relentless probing, was condemned to drink hemlock for daring to awaken minds from their slumber. Galileo, lifting the veil on the cosmos, was confined for shattering centuries of dogma. Tesla, dreaming of energy unbound, faded into obscurity while profiteers reaped his genius. Yet women like Hypatia faced a fiercer reckoning, murdered in 415 AD by a mob enraged not just by her ideas, but by her audacity to wield them in a world ruled by men. Her death was a brutal testament. A woman who thinks too deeply risks not merely isolation, but obliteration. These tales resonate across centuries, a chorus of brilliance met with rejection not for lack of truth, but for an excess of vision. Why then does intelligence, particularly in women, to such a knees? And like strength or riches which dazzle from without, intelligence strikes at the heart of who we are. We women define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, our grasp of the world's vastness. When another, especially one of our own, delves deeper, questions louder, it feels like an assault on our very essence. Society, built on the scaffolding of routine and polite deception, bristles at this disruption. Schopenhauer saw it with piercing lucidity. Most are driven by the will to live, chasing pleasure and shunning pain. But the intelligent woman pursues the will to truth, a quest that sets her apart from a world tethered to comfort. Her refusal to play the games of small talk or status jars the social order, marking her as an outsider in a realm that prizes conformity. In this digital age, that rejection swells to new heights. Social media, with its algorithms favoring the loud and the shallow, drowns the nuanced voice of the thinking woman. Viral snippets, simple, emotional, often hollow, race ahead of the slow, steady blaze of reason. A woman who dares to thread complexity into her words finds her audience scarce, her depth lost in a flood of entertainment. Schools, too, betray her. P.R. Ising wrote obedience over bold inquiry, while workplaces reward those who blend into the fold over those who forge new paths. The message echoes, fit in or fade away. Yet history whispers a different truth. Galileo's revelations, Tesla's innovations, Hypatia's legacy endure, cherished only when the threat they posed has softened into memory. Schopenhauer's philosophy offers us a lens, women of wisdom, to grasp this burden. Ye saw the will as a blind, irrational force propelling humanity toward ease, while the intelligent few women among them chase understanding, even at the cost of connection. This rift is our crucible, where others find solace in the everyday. We pierce its veneer, yearning for meaning beyond the trivial. Our awareness, a gift, becomes a weight isolating us from a society that prefers ignorance to insight. Skal and Kafka too wrestled with this solitude, their brilliance a companion to despair. For women, this isolation cuts deeper, sharpened by the expectation to nurture rather than know, to feel rather than think. Yet Schopenhauer did not abandon us to despair. He urged deep thinkers, women of insight above all, to embrace solitude as a sacred refuge, a space for creation, a reflection. Seek kindred spirits, he counseled, not in the clamor of the masses, but in the quiet pages of books, the rare souls who share your flame. Engage the world with discernment, choosing when to unveil your depth, for not all are ready to receive it. This wisdom is our armor and our weapon, a guide to navigate a world that fears our light. Intelligence, he argued, is a double-edged sword, painful in its solitude, potent in its clarity. For women, it is also a defiance, a refusal to be diminished by the roles thrust upon us. Through the centuries, women have wielded this sword with grace and grit. Hypatia's murder did not silence her teachings. Her courage ripples through time, a beacon for those who follow. Nietzsche too speaks to us. His Be our Mensch, the overcomer, finds echo in every woman who rises above constraint. His eternal recurrence dares us to live boldly, to craft lives worthy of endless replay. These philosophies intertwine with our own battles against gender roles, against silence, offering a map to empowerment. Education becomes our chisel, breaking chains for ourselves and our children, fostering resilience in a world that resists change. We are not mere thinkers, we are builders of freedom, weaving communities where curiosity thrives. The digital echo chambers of today mirror the mobs of old, swift to dismiss, slow to comprehend. Yet we women persist, our voices cutting through the din. She Thinks is our testament, a space where philosophy meets resilience, where women's empowerment is not a whisper but a roar. We challenge norms not to unsettle, but to uplift ourselves, our sisters, our daughters. Society may fear us as it feared Socrates and Tesla, but that fear is a sign of our strength. We see what others cannot, and in that vision lies our power to heal, to create, to lead. Well, every woman who has felt the sting of dismissal, know this: your mind is a force, a lantern in a world that craves light yet clings to shadow. Schopenhauer's curse is also our gift, the ability to see, to question, to transform. We stand with the outcasts of history, not as victims, but as trailblazers. Our isolation is not a prison, but a 4J place to shape ideas that will one day shift the tide. Society resists because it senses this shift, this unstoppable wave of women who think, who dare, who rise. We are the deep thinkers it fears, and in that fear lies our triumph. Let us linger here, women of She Thinks, and reflect on the breadth of this truth. Society's fear is not a random whim. It is a response to the power we wield, power rooted in our refusal to bow to the ordinary. When we think deeply, we do not merely ponder, we reshape. We unravel the myths that bind us, from the expectation of silent motherhood to the shackles of gendered dependence. Philosophy, the love of wisdom, becomes our ally, illuminating paths where others see only walls. Schopenhauer's will to truth is our inheritance, a call to embrace the discomfort of insight over the ease of illusion. And in this embrace, we find not just solitude, but sovereignty. Consider the women who came before us, their stories stitched into the fabric of our resilience. Hypatia, standing firm in a world that sought to erase her, taught us that knowledge is worth the fight. Her death was not an end, but a beginning, a spark that lights our way. Nietzsche's vision of self-overcoming speaks to every woman who has defied the script, who has chose an agency over acceptance. Is eternal recurrence is a challenge. Live as if your choices echo forever, for they do in the daughters we raise, the communities we build, the truths we dare to speak. These philosophies are not distant relics. They are living tools sharpened by our hands, honed by our struggles. Education, too, is our weapon, a means to break the generational chains that bind women and children alike. In a world that often stifles curiosity, we nurture it, planting seeds of resilience in the minds of the young. We reject the notion that intelligence is a threat. Instead, we wield it as a gift, a bridge from oppression to empowerment. Society may resist, but we persist, for we know that change begins in the quiet moments of understanding, moments we create, moments we share. She Thinks is more than a channel, it is a movement, a call to women everywhere to claim their intellectual birthright, to stand tall in the face of fear. The digital age, with its relentless pace, tests our resolve. Algorithms favor the fleeting over the profound, rewarding noise over nuance. Yet we do not falter. We speak, we write, we think not for the fleeting applause of the crowd, but for the enduring echo of truth. Our voices may not always trend, but they resonate, finding purchase in the hearts of those who seek depth over distraction. We are the philosophers of our time, the visionaries who see beyond the horizon, the women who refuse to be silenced. Society's fear is a mirror, reflecting not our weakness, but our strength, a strength that grows with every thought, every word, every act of defiance. So, women of She Thinks, let us expand this vision further. Imagine a world where our daughters inherit not just our struggles, but our triumphs, where they wield their minds as swords and shields, cutting through the noise to carve their own paths. Picture communities where children's curiosity is not a threat, but a treasure nurtured by mothers, sisters, and thinkers who dare to lead. Philosophy is our guide, resilience our foundation, empowerment our goal. Schopenhauer's curse becomes our crown, for in accepting the solitude of deep thought we claim the freedom to shape the future. This is not a solitary journey. We walk with the giants of history: Socrates, who chose truth over life; Galileo, who saw the stars when others saw only ceilings; Tesla, who dreamed beyond his time. We walk with Hypatia, whose blood stained the stones of Alexandria, yet whose spirit soars in every woman who dares to know. We walk with Nietzsche, whose call to overcome resounds in our refusal to bend. Their stories are ours, their struggles our own, their victories a promise of what we can achieve. Society fears us not because we are frail, but because we are formidable, because our minds, once awakened, cannot be contained. Let us stretch this tapestry wider still. The resistance we face is not just personal, it is systemic, woven into the institutions that shape us. Schools teach conformity, rewarding those who recite rather than question. Workplaces prize the compliant over the creative, sidelining women who dare to innovate. Politics exalt the loud over the wise, drowning out voices that speak with reason. Yet we defy these structures not with rage, but with resolve. We educate ourselves and our children, building free schools in our minds and hearts, breaking the cycles of poverty, limitation with the power of thought. We are the mothers of change, the sisters of progress, the daughters of a legacy yet unwritten. In the quiet of our reflections, we find strength. Solitude, as Schopenhauer taught, is not a punishment but a privileged space where we craft ideas that outlast us. We seek not the approval of the many, but the kingship of the few, those rare souls who see as we do, who burn with the same fire. We speak not to overwhelm, but to awaken, choosing our words with the care of a sculptor shaping stone. Our intelligence is our rebellion, our isolation our forge, our vision our gift. Society may fear us, but that fear is fleeting. Our impact is eternal. So we stand, women of She Thinks, at the crossroads of past and future. We are the deep thinkers of our age, the philosophers who weave wisdom from struggle, the mothers who plant seeds of freedom in the minds of our children. We are not alone, for every woman who has felt the weight of her thoughts joins us here. Our minds are a power, our resilience our shield, our will to truth our guide. Society may resist, but we endure because we see, because we know, because we rise. In this rising, we claim not just our own freedom, but the freedom of all who follow. Dear women of She Thinks, we've traversed the shadowed corridors of history and the depths of the human soul to uncover why society fears those who think deeply, especially women like us, whose intellect defies the confines of tradition. Schopenhauer's piercing insight reveals intelligence as both a burden and a blessing, a truth women have carried through centuries of resistance and triumph. From Hypatia's defiant stand to Tesla's lonely brilliance, we see a pattern. Brilliance, particularly in women, is feared not for its flaws, but for its power to illuminate. This is our legacy: to see beyond the veil, to challenge the status quo, and to empower ourselves and our children with the philosophy of freedom. Now, we invite you to join us. Have you ever felt your thoughts set you apart, a quiet strength others couldn't grasp? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a chorus of resilience together. If this strikes a chord, share it with a sister, a daughter, a friend. Let's expand this circle of bold minds. Subscribe to She Thinks, your sanctuary for insights that uplift and inspire. Next, stay tuned as Sophia and James dive deeper into how women's wisdom shapes our world, their discussion unfolding right after this. Together we rise, for in thinking deeply, we forge a future unbound.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to take a deep dive into something kind of different. It's something that's been on my mind a lot lately, and it's this idea that society seems to have a kind of a fear of women who think really deeply.
Oh, yeah, I totally see
Like
it.
there's almost this resistance to it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's something we're going to explore today using this super interesting article from She Thinks, which is this awesome online community focused on empowering women through philosophy.
Yeah, they actually weave in some insights from the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, too, which is really cool.
Yeah, Schopenhauer. I got to admit, before this article, I only kind of knew him as like a name in a textbook,
Yeah.
But the way they use his ideas to explain this whole phenomena is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only get why this fear exists, but you'll also see how it connects to your own experiences, Like whether you're a woman, a man, or anything in between, really.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about philosophy, isn't it? It can give us these timeless insights into human nature that are still so relevant today.
For sure. Okay, so the article starts off by talking about how Schopenhauer saw intelligence itself as kind of a paradox, especially for women. He believed that being really intelligent could actually be a burden, almost like a curse. Have you ever heard that take before?
Oh, it's definitely a different way to look at things. But when you think about it, there's a certain logic to it, you know? Schopenhauer argued that the smarter you are, the more you see and understand about the world. And that can lead you to some pretty uncomfortable truths about the world and about people. even people you love, And those are truths that some people would rather just ignore.
Totally. It's like you're suddenly aware of all the cracks in the facade and everyone else is just going about their lives, you know?
Right. And that can be a very isolating feeling.
Yeah, like being the only one who sees the monster in the horror movie, you know? And you're trying to warn everyone, but they just think you're crazy.
Exactly.
And the article argues that this sense of isolation is often amplified for women because of like centuries of societal expectations, you know? And frankly, the suppression of their voices. Historically, women have been assigned very specific roles, and intellectual pursuits were often seen as a threat to those roles.
It's true. And they weren't really encouraged to develop their minds in the same way that men were.
Yeah, it's like society was saying, okay, ladies, you can be smart, but not too smart, which is ridiculous, right?
It is. And the article uses this really chilling example, Hypatia of Alexandria. She was this brilliant philosopher and mathematician who lived in like the 5th century AD, and she was brutally murdered for her ideas.
Wow, that's just... Wow. It's a pretty stark reminder of how deeply rooted this fear of intellectual women can be.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how much has actually changed, Like, we may not be burning women at the stake for their ideas anymore, but are there more subtle forms of suppression still happening today?
That's a question worth asking for sure.
Yeah.
And it leads us to this other concept that the article talks about, the mirror effect. Okay, I'm listening. What's the mirror effect?
So basically the idea is that deep thinkers, especially women, can make other people uncomfortable because they unintentionally hold up a mirror reflecting back the other person's own intellectual limitations.
So just by being intelligent, women are somehow threatening others?
Not intentionally, of course. But think about it this way. When someone is really intelligent, especially in an area where you might feel less confident, it can trigger like insecurity or even resentment. And that discomfort can often be projected outward, leading to the perception that the intelligent person is being arrogant or condescending, even if they're not.
Right, like they're trying to show off or make you feel dumb.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual insecurities either. There's a societal layer to this as well. Intelligent women often challenge traditional power dynamics and expectations. They disrupt the status quo simply by existing and expressing their intelligence.
I see.
And that can be very threatening to those who benefit from the existing power structures.
So zooming out a bit, this fear of deep-thinking women isn't just about individual discomfort. It's also about control and maintaining existing hierarchies.
You got it. And it's not a new phenomenon either. Think about our evolutionary past way back to when we were living in tribes.
Okay.
Dissenting from the group's beliefs or questioning the leader that could get you kicked out of the tribe, which back then was basically a death sentence.
Yeah, back then survival depended on being part of the group. So rocking the boat with new ideas was a big risk.
Exactly. And even though we've evolved a lot since then, our brains still carry those ancient imprints. We crave belonging, and we're wired to see those who challenge the group's beliefs as potential threats.
So it's like this primal fear response kicking in even though the stakes aren't nearly as high as they were back then?
There's actually some really cool neuroscience research that backs this up too.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that the amygdala, the part of the brain that's associated with fear, actually activates when we're confronted with someone we perceive as intellectually superior.
Whoa, so it's like literally hardwired into us. But wait, if this is such a primal thing, wouldn't it apply to anyone who challenges the status quo, not just women?
That's a great question, and the She Thinks article addresses it directly. They argue that while this fear might be universal to some extent, it's been amplified and weaponized against women throughout history.
I see.
They point to all these examples of brilliant minds throughout history facing rejection, persecution, or even death for their ideas.
Like Socrates being forced to drink hemlock, Galileo being put under house arrest.
Exactly. These are all tragic examples of how societies have reacted to those who dared to think differently, who challenged the established norms and beliefs.
Right.
And the article argues that women like Hypatia faced even harsher consequences because their intelligence was seen as a double threat. Not only were they challenging intellectual authority, but they were also challenging gender roles and expectations.
Yeah, so it's like their brilliance was this double whammy that society just couldn't handle. But hold on. Why is intelligence seen as such a threat in the first place? It's not like physical strength or wealth where the threat is more obvious.
That's a really good point. And it gets to the core of why intelligence, especially in women, can be so unsettling. Unlike other forms of power intelligence, challenges our core beliefs, our understanding of the world, and even our own identities. It forces us to confront our own limitations, our own biases, and our own assumptions about how the world works.
It's like somebody's shaking up your snow globe and saying, hey, guess what? That perfectly arranged little world you thought you knew. It's way more complicated and messy than that.
Uh-huh. That's a great way to put it.
And that can be a pretty uncomfortable experience, right?
Oh.
Especially if you've built your sense of self or your worldview around those comfortable established ideas.
Absolutely. And that's where I think Schopenhauer's ideas about the will to live versus the will to truth become really relevant.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned those earlier.
Yeah.
Can you remind us what those are all about?
So the will to live is that basic human drive to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and maintain comfort and stability. It's what motivates most people in their day-to-day lives.
Okay, makes sense.
The will to truth, on the other hand, is more of an intellectual drive. It's about seeking knowledge and understanding even when it's uncomfortable or disruptive.
So it's like two different operating systems almost.
Mm-hmm.
The will to live folks are focused on maintaining the status quo, while the will to truth folks are constantly questioning it, poking holes in it, trying to see what lies beneath the surface.
Exactly. And you can imagine how that creates some friction, especially when the will to truth is coming from someone who society has traditionally tried to silence or control.
Totally. No wonder there's a clash. But wait, before we go any further, I want to make sure we're connecting this back to our listener.
Yeah, good point.
Like, what does all this philosophical talk actually mean for them in their everyday lives?
Yeah, let's take a moment to connect this back to your own experiences.
Perfect. We'll be right back after a quick break to delve into that.
Sounds good.
See you in a sec. All right, so we're back. And before the break, we were talking about Schopenhauer's ideas about the will to live versus the will to truth.
Right, and how those different drives can create friction, between deep thinkers, especially women, and a society that often values comfort and stability over those tough questions.
Exactly. But, let's bring this down to earth for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, okay, this is all interesting, but how does it relate to me?
Well, think about it this way. Have you ever had like an idea, a belief, or just like a perspective on something that felt really important to you? But then when you tried to share it, with other people, you were met with resistance or dismissal or even like ridicule?
Ooh, yeah, I think we've all been there at some point. Like you feel misunderstood,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like your voice isn't being heard.
That's exactly what we're talking about. And for women, especially those who are deep thinkers, this experience can be even more common because they're often up against not just individual biases, but also these like deeply ingrained societal expectations about how women should think and behave.
So it's like this double whammy. You're battling against both individual perceptions and these larger cultural forces that are trying to silence or marginalize your voice.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where Schopenhauer's insight about the will to truth becomes really powerful, because if you can recognize that drive within yourself, that desire to seek knowledge and understanding, even when it's uncomfortable, you can start to see those moments of resistance, not as a sign that you're wrong or that you should just stay silent, but as an indicator that you're on to something important.
Oh, I love that. It's like turning that feeling of rejection into fuel, into motivation to keep digging deeper, to keep questioning and to keep speaking your truth.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's where the She Thinks article offers some really practical advice for navigating this. It can be tough, but one of their suggestions is to actively seek out communities and spaces where your intellect is valued and celebrated.
Okay. So it's like finding your tribe, finding those people who get you, who challenge you, who inspire you to think bigger and bolder.
Precisely. And thankfully, in today's world, there are more opportunities than ever to connect with like-minded individuals, There are online communities, book clubs, discussion groups, even podcasts like this one, where people can come together to explore ideas, share perspectives, and support each other's intellectual growth.
Yeah, it's about creating those safe spaces where you can be your full intelligent self without fear of judgment or dismissal.
Yeah.
And not just finding those spaces, but like actively contributing to them, right?
Absolutely. It's about sharing your own ideas, engaging in thoughtful discussions, and supporting other deep thinkers. It's about creating a ripple effect, spreading that love of learning and critical thinking outward.
I love that imagery, the ripple effect. Because even small actions like joining a book club or starting a conversation about a thought-provoking article can have a big impact over time.
Exactly. Those ripples can eventually turn into waves of change. But finding those external communities is only part of the equation. The She Thinks article also emphasizes the importance of cultivating inner strength and confidence in your own intellectual abilities.
So it's not just about finding external validation, it's about owning your intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Not apologizing for it or downplaying it to make others feel more comfortable.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your unique perspective and your ability to think deeply are valuable assets both for yourself and for the world.
Which I know can be hard, right?
Huh.
Especially as women, we're often told to be quiet, to be agreeable,
Yeah.
to not make waves.
Yeah, those societal pressures are very real, and it can be really tough to navigate them. But the more we challenge them, the more we push back against those limiting beliefs, the more we create space for ourselves and other deep-thinking women to rise.
And the article also talked about mentorship, right? Like finding those women who've already paved the way and learning from their experiences.
Absolutely. Mentorship can be so powerful. It's about having someone who believes in you, who challenges you, who guides you, and helps you navigate the complexities of being an intelligent woman in a world that doesn't always value or understand that intelligence.
Yeah, it's about creating a network of support, a sisterhood of intellect, where women can lift each other up and encourage each other to reach their full potential.
Exactly. And it's not just about women supporting women, it's about men also stepping up and becoming allies and advocating for women's voices to be heard and respected in all spaces.
So true. It's about recognizing that true equality and progress require everyone to be actively engaged in dismantling those systems of oppression and creating a more inclusive and just world.
Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to one of the most powerful tools we have for creating change: education.
Yes, if we want to create lasting change, we need to start early. We need to teach our children, both boys and girls, to value critical thinking, to embrace curiosity, and to respect different perspectives.
Right. It's about fostering a love of learning, not just for the sake of acquiring knowledge, but for the sake of developing those critical thinking skills that are essential for navigating a complex world.
Absolutely. We need to teach our kids to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and to think for themselves. And just as importantly, we need to model those behaviors ourselves.
It's about creating a culture of intellectual curiosity where asking why isn't seen as a challenge to authority, but as a sign of engagement and a desire to learn and understand.
Okay, so we've talked about finding your tribe, cultivating inner confidence, seeking out mentorship, and the importance of education. Are there any other strategies that the She Thinks article highlighted for, like, turning this fear into empowerment?
Yeah, they specifically talked about using your voice. Even when it feels scary or uncomfortable, they argue that it's essential for deep-thinking women to share their ideas and perspectives with the world.
That makes sense. Because if we stay silent, if we let that fear keep us hidden, then we're basically letting those who fear our intellect win.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our voices have power, and that by using them, we can challenge the status quo, inspire others, and create meaningful change.
But I know it's not always easy to speak up, right?
Yeah,
Especially when, you might face criticism or pushback.
you're right. It takes courage and resilience. But the She Thinks article offers some good tips for finding your voice and using it effectively.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of those tips?
Well, they start by emphasizing the importance of knowing your audience. Before you share your ideas, take some time to consider who you're talking to and what their values and perspectives might be.
So it's about tailoring your message to resonate with the people you're talking to and finding that common ground that allows for connection and understanding. Makes sense. What else?
They also talked about the power of storytelling. They argue that stories can be super effective for communicating complex ideas in a way that's relatable and engaging.
Oh, for sure. Because stories have a way of bypassing those intellectual defenses, and they touch people on a deeper emotional level. They help us see the world through someone else's eyes.
Exactly. And the article encourages women to share their own stories, to be vulnerable and authentic in their communication. They say that this vulnerability can actually be a source of strength because it allows for a deeper connection and understanding.
It's about showing up as your full self, not just the intellectual side, but the emotional human side as well. That's powerful.
And they also stress the importance of being persistent. Change takes time, and there will be setbacks and challenges along the way.
So it's about not giving up even when it feels like no one's listening. It's about continuing to push forward, knowing that every time you speak up, you're planting a seed that could eventually lead to positive change.
Exactly. And they encourage women to find strength and support in each other, to create networks of solidarity and encouragement, and to celebrate each other's successes.
It's about recognizing that we're stronger together, and that by supporting and amplifying each other's voices, we can create a more powerful and lasting impact.
Yes. And lastly, they emphasize the importance of self-care. The work of challenging societal norms and fighting for equality can be emotionally draining.
So true. So it's about making sure you're taking care of your own mental and emotional well-being, right? Like finding those things that help you stay grounded and resilient.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup and that taking care of yourself is essential for showing up fully for yourself and the causes you care about.
This has been so insightful. I feel like we've covered so much. Finding your tribe, cultivating inner confidence, seeking out mentorship, the importance of education, using your voice, and prioritizing self-care. It's like a toolkit for anyone, really, not just deep-thinking women.
I agree. And it's important to remember that progress isn't linear. There will be ups and downs, moments of doubt and moments of triumph. The key is to keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time.
And to remember that you're not alone. There are so many other deep thinkers out there, and together we can create a world that values and celebrates intellectual curiosity and the courage to challenge the status quo.
Beautifully said. But before we move on, I think it's important to acknowledge that not all women identify as deep thinkers, and that's totally fine.
That's a great point. This conversation isn't meant to exclude anyone or suggest that there's only one right way to be a woman.
Right. It's about celebrating the diversity of thought and experience that exists within the female population, and recognizing that every woman has her own unique strengths and contributions to make to the world.
It's about creating a society that values and respects all women, regardless of their intellectual interests, their career paths, or their personal choices.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that true equality requires us to embrace and celebrate all the different ways that women choose to express themselves and live their lives.
So while this deep dive is focused specifically on the challenges and triumphs of deep-thinking women, the underlying message is really one of inclusivity and respect for all women.
Well said. And it's a message that I hope will resonate with our listeners regardless of their gender identity or their intellectual inclinations.
Absolutely. It's a message about embracing our differences,
Yeah.
celebrating our strengths, and working together to create a world where every woman feels valued, respected, and empowered to be her authentic self.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to the final part of our deep dive into why society fears deep-thinking women and what we can do to turn that fear into a force for positive change.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. And wow, this whole conversation about society's fear of deep-thinking women has really gotten me thinking.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that challenges a lot of those deep-seated assumptions we have.
It really is. And I
Yeah.
think it's so important to be having these conversations, bringing these issues to light and figuring out how to create a more inclusive and equitable world.
Couldn't agree more. And as we kind of wrap up our discussion today, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. This idea that society's fear of these women is almost like proof of their power.
Ah, you mean like by trying to suppress these women?
Yeah.
Society's basically admitting how much potential they have to change things.
Exactly. It's like that saying, what you resist persists. The more you try to push something down, the stronger it comes back.
So instead of seeing this fear as a weakness, we can actually see it as recognition of the impact these women can have. If they're given the space and the support to really use their intelligence.
Exactly. And that's where the She Thinks article's call to action comes in. They're really urging women to embrace their intellect, to find those communities where they're supported to use their voices and to be mentors for the next generation.
It's like creating this ripple effect of empowerment, inspiring more women to step into their power and use their voices to create a world that's more equal and just intellectually vibrant.
And it's a call to action for all of us, not just women, to challenge those norms that try to limit how women express themselves intellectually, and to create spaces where their voices are not just heard, but truly celebrated.
Because when we embrace and value the contributions of these women, everyone benefits.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up today, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I hope they come away with a better understanding of just how complex this whole issue is. Society's relationship with deep-thinking women is not simple. And I also hope they feel empowered knowing that their intelligence isn't something to hide, but something to celebrate.
And I hope they feel inspired to embrace their own journeys of learning and to share their unique voices and perspectives with the world.
Because the world needs their voices. It needs their insights. It needs their courage to imagine a better future.
And, maybe just by having these conversations, by talking about these issues, we can start to shift that fear into something better.
Maybe even turn that fear into respect and admiration for what these women can do.
That's something worth working towards.
It really is. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us, everyone. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has been a pleasure.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new topic. So until then, keep those brains working. Keep asking questions and keep using your voices to make the world a better place.